Hey Mandy, how are you?
Good. How are you, Justin?
I'm doing amazing. I'm doing amazing. Well, thanks for joining the podcast. And for those that are watching this and don't know who you are or your background, I'd like to open it up and just share a bit about yourself.
Yeah, great. Let's do this. My name is Mandy Rother, and I'm a functional dietitian. And I like to tell my clients that sometimes I want to take my dietitian name tag off because it comes with a lot of preconceived notions about what I do. And what we do is very different and unique than a typical dietitian. And we combine, like my practice that I have, we have a small team. And we really, our passion is working with, we do work with men, but really passionate about women's health and the cross section between hormones and mental health. And we have this way, I call it our special sauce. We weave together functional nutrition and really bringing in a method and an approach that honors someone's autonomy and choice and nervous system, really working with their bodies and their cycles in a unique way. That is what we do on our team. And my practice is Reveal Functional Nutrition.
Awesome, awesome. And where are you based out of curiosity?
I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Sometimes in Mexico, but this is my home base.
I love it. I love it. Well, so maybe could we like step back and just sort of, can you share a little bit about what led you to embrace functional nutrition? Um, was I'm assuming there was something going on with you. Could you just, fill us in on that a little bit?
Yeah. And this, whenever I'm on a podcast, this is like the important question that's always asked. And I often start with my story of like when I was in college. That's when I like received all these diagnoses of, it was like an alphabet soup, so many different things, IBS and anxiety and major depressive disorder and PCOS and PMDD. And it was a combination of things where I was just like, I need help. And then it was exacerbated by the stress of college. And I
Yeah.
was your classic, like, type A student and in the orchestra and captain of the rugby team. And it was just pressure, pressure. And so that's really when I had my first like breakdown of all these things. And I was in the conventional medicine system trying birth control, antidepressants, more birth control, more antidepressants, and just feeling really, really stuck. Like a lot of things actually made me feel worse. And it was a challenging time because I was committed to like figuring it out and like committed to the college process. But what I've been thinking about is like that's where it all started. But I actually think it started much sooner than that. Like I remember during childhood, I just had this interest in health. I would go and I would, feel certain emotions and I would go rollerblade 15 miles and notice how differently I felt back when I should start rollerblading again. But, um, and I've been reflecting even, I just turned 40 and I'm a mother and of four. And I'm like, why did I have that interest early on? And I've shared this with my mom, so it's okay to share here. But I really think it started with seeing her lack of self care and how stressful and unsafe that felt to me as a child. And so it was like I was so curious about how people took care of their bodies or why they didn't take care of their bodies and how I would feel different when I did or when I didn't. And then it fueled from there of like digestive issues as a child that landed me in the hospital and all these layers kind of piled on top of each other where it was just it honestly has felt like my path along the way and all my health challenges have like just like each layer has prepared me to go into this work, to know it was the work for me and to like deepen it. It sucks to go through all of that.
Yeah.
But it's really what has fueled not just like my empathy for the people that I work with, but the necessity to have like such a deep knowledge and this process that we take people through. So yeah, lots of layers to my story.
No, it is. And I would think a lot of women listening to this especially can relate to that and probably feel the same way. At least in my life, a lot of the women seem to put everybody else's needs and care and all of that in front of their own.
Hmm.
Um, what are some of the common things? Like, I'm sure there's something going on symptom wise or whatnot when somebody reaches out to you and says, okay, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I need help. What are
Hmm.
some sort of common things that are prompting people to reach out to you?
Yeah. Because of what we specialize in, a lot of people they've feel like they have hit dead ends with challenges with their menstrual cycle. Either they have irregular periods or they have like a mysterious PCOS pattern where they feel like they haven't gotten complete answers. They know there's more to the picture. We also specialize in PMDD, a condition called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And there's just not enough information out there. And I decided when I launched my practice 5 years ago, it's our 5 year anniversary last month. And I decided to really like specialize in these things where not just because of my lived experience, but where I saw there were gaps. And so oftentimes they'll describe it as like something's got to change, like my marriage is at risk. Or I don't like the way that I'm interacting with my children. I can't stop yelling because I feel so dysregulated. And it's this mix of, everyone has a different experience, but sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's depression, even intrusive thoughts. Sometimes there's physical symptoms along with it. But the big thing is that they have this weight of how it's impacting their life, and they're faced with it, all the time, every single month. And then the weight of feeling really lost in the system, and feeling like, I was presented with these options and they're either already didn't work for me or they're not right for me. So that's what lands people at my doorstep. I'm normally, a lot of the people that come to me, they've tried a lot of things, and they're looking for something different.
What so I would think the conventional care approach probably leaves some people in the lurch, as you said, frustrated, etc.
Mhm.
Um, I know in again, kind of thinking about the women in my life, there's been a couple of tests that are pretty basic that get ordered,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh well, everything looks good. I guess
Yep.
you're okay. So from where you sit, like, what's the role of like lab work?
Mhm.
How do you start to uncover what might be going on? When, to your point, some women have felt like what they've been presented with doesn't work for them,
Mhm.
or it just doesn't excite them or make them feel like it'll be a help.
Yeah, let's start with the lab piece because I think
Okay.
that's important. And in my former life, I led a team of dietitians for a big wellness brand, and training them in utilizing blood work for wellness purposes.
Okay.
And I that's been just years and years where I geek out on that. I love it. And so it's I see this like there's a few different issues that I see both in the conventional space and even in the functional medicine space with lab work. In the conventional space, it's exactly what you said. I either had lab work and everyone told me it was normal. And part of that is they're using standardized ranges that are too wide and broad for wellness.
Okay.
Um, the other situation is they couldn't get the blood work that they needed. Their doctor often, will tell them it's not medically necessary. And honestly, sometimes from their perspective, it's not medically necessary to diagnose and treat. If they don't have a reason to order it for diagnostic purposes, they can't bill it to insurance and all the codes. And
Yeah.
I try to remind clients of that because it can help diffuse some of the anger they come in with and the frustration, even though it's very understandable. And so they're left in this place where they just like intuitively know there's something deeper going on, but they can't access the information. So I think that is really huge. Or especially if labs come back normal and then they're dismissive, like, see, everything looks fine. I told you.
Yeah.
Is that what you often hear as well or seen in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. Or it's just straight to surgery. Like it feels like it's extremes. It's either you're
Mhm.
okay and there's this sort of gaslighting vibe that goes on, or it is like, oh, it's gone way too long. And it seems like there's no room for a middle ground where people can
Mhm.
just holistically get back on their 2 feet.
Yeah. Well, and even then, it's like that's what leads people to pursue functional medicine.
Mhm.
And I think the testing is really important in that. But sometimes what I'm seeing with functional medicine is sometimes it swings all the way to the other side. I don't know if you've witnessed this, but like too many tests, like so many tests that is you can't even action on all of them. And then someone spent so much money that they can't afford the rest of their care as far as like getting guidance on those tests and whatever interventions and support is needed. And so I really like I have this like roadmap that I've created for my practice that it's like, what is our like layers of data that we need to collect? So we are prioritizing what we need to meet that client where they're at, taking that data driven process, but making sure everything we're gathering is very, very actionable because we don't want like data chaos, which is sometimes what I see happen. And someone's all of a sudden told they have all these things. It's like the more you test, sometimes the more sick you feel because the tests are so in depth
Mm.
that you will find something in each test. So you got to be prudent. It's like really, really in depth, customized blood work is almost always where I start. And then from there, I'm prioritizing based on the person's story and their needs. Sometimes we bring in genetics or gut testing or hormone panels, but it has to make sense for what is actually presenting in them and what their priorities are.
And is that the sort of reveal method that I've read about on your site? Is can like what when somebody starts working with you, what do like the first one or two steps kind of look like?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a big part of it. And I think the first step is really that first layer of data that's even before we test, we need to look at. I always ask people their timeline. Like it's like I go into like detective mode looking at like when did these symptoms start? When did they worsen? And looking at how does that connect to what I think is going on with their physiology.
Yeah.
Pulling together like what are their symptoms and not just like the individual isolated symptoms, because that's where it can get tricky where functional medicine and functional nutrition becomes like conventional, where it's like you have this symptom, you take this supplement. And we want to avoid that. We need to think of it in a systemic type of approach. And so really I'm starting to gather like their overall symptom patterns with that timeline. And then from there, we can bring in the actual data to really, I call it piecing together their puzzle. And it's really, I, it's like untangling layer by layer what is going on. And then from there, I think the most important thing is it's not just collecting information and collecting data. We have to be able to action on that in a way that meets the person where they're at. And that doesn't always mean baby steps, but when they understand why this is happening in their body, I find that actually really empowers people to take bigger action than they thought was possible. And they make faster progress, not because they're doing everything under the sun and their wellness to-do list is this long. It's because it's very strategic based on what they need with what we uncovered. So yeah, that's the heart of what we do, where it's really in partnership with the client, not just here's your data, here's your list of 25 supplements, good luck. We have to, I see that too much in this space, and so we very intentionally do things differently.
Why do you think that and it makes a lot of sense, just I think intuitively everybody is unique and a one size fits all sort of cookie cutter
Mhm,
approach is easy to maybe email to somebody or whatever,
mhm,
but it may not be as relevant for what's going on. Why do
mhm.
you think it is? Like, why do you think so many practitioners rely on a just sort of a protocol based approach instead of something that's a little bit more like bio-identical?
Yeah, I think it depends on the training. And if we go even back further than that, where when you think of like in this age of social media and marketing, it's easier to say, hey, you have this thing, here is your black and white answer. And I think our society is trained to look for that. It's like even being in the conventional medicine system trains you to look for that. And so sometimes I need to first help the person that I'm working with understand why it's not just like a pill for an ill type of thing. And I think why is that so common? I My concern sometimes with the functional medicine space is like we don't want to people that are working with us to feel like they're in this like hamster wheel, like this, like, we have too many clients and we're just, here's your plan, here's your approach. And so I think sometimes it's so many factors, easier to market. Sometimes there's like practitioner burnout involved. And sometimes it's like the training. We have to have training that's not just if someone has this condition or this symptom, here's their 5-step protocol. That doesn't work. And that's what I see too much. It's like we have to look at what does this presentation tell us about the mechanisms underneath? How do we impact those mechanisms? So even if we look at like, let's say like a hormone imbalance, like for me, I had very high testosterone levels. What's driving that for me is going to be different than what's driving it for someone else. And so when I look at not just my lab result, but what I know about my genetics, what I know about my lifestyle, what I saw on like a more in-depth hormone panel, I can start to be like, oh, it's this pathway in my hormones that's being pushed too much. These are the things that come in and influence it. And it can be things like inflammation or missing nutrient cofactors or genetics that we actually can work with the genetics to make it kind of route the right way versus just you have this problem. So I think we have to, and that's what makes me like just so committed to learning more and more. And even right before this, I had a meeting with the other practitioner on my team, and her and I are always digging into cases, picking each other's brains to like go deeper because that's what people really need. So it's sustainable healing.
Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm I mean, congratulations on a 5-year anniversary
Thank
of the
you.
practice. You've been in this space, I think, 15 years or so. I would imagine you've seen a lot of healing sort of breakthroughs that have just stuck with you, and
Mhm.
somebody who's watching this might, resonate with. So I'm just curious, like, what's one, you don't have to share names or anything, but just an example of one that like still sticks in your mind to this day,
Yeah.
that
There is
you experienced.
oh, there's so many. Like with our 5-year anniversary, I was in my personality, I will start with this. I'm an overachiever. When I do something, I want to do it well. And then I turned 40 at the same time. So I went through this like little crisis like last month or two of like this like mix of being so proud of how far we've come and all the people we've helped, and then also simultaneously like doesn't feel like enough and we have to reach more people and like have to deepen my knowledge in this area. I'm always, and that's like a double-edged sword. And so I like challenge myself to go back and read through like Google reviews and like testimonials from clients to like reignite me on like why this is so important. So and I was actually reading through some from early in my journey, like right when I started my practice. And that was a time where I had so much belief that I could help people in this way, but that belief was like shaky because like all the information online would tell me like no, you can't help with these specific problems, like nothing will help, nothing will work. And there's reading in forums and all of that. And so these early stories that I collected and seeing it like before my eyes and people's health transform, like those are the ones that give me the most chills because it's what told me like yes, you're onto something, keep going. And this is specifically with like really challenging mental health challenges in women and PMDD and such. But the one story, this was an early on one. She had come to me and she was like, I don't know if I want to be a mother because my symptoms are so severe. And I can't, and she was telling me, I can't imagine being a mother and having this experience in my body and like how my thoughts feel and how anxious I feel and all these things. And wasn't just this client, I hear this often. And it's like for me, it's like if someone wants to be a parent, I want them to feel like they trust their bodies enough to be a parent. Um, and and for her, like she had worked with like multiple naturopaths. She had come in like having done a lot of different things. She had a personal trainer who was like working with her on nutrition. She had it all. And like many clients, it's like hard for her to understand or trust initially of like, how is this going to be different? And so as we were working together, like she took that leap and we just uncovered so much that had been missed that was like placing so much stress on her system. And this particular story, she had like challenges with her estrogen detox that were connected to her gut stuff. And none of this had been like deeply addressed. She was under exercising and over exercising and under eating that was placing a different type of stress and really stressing her, like impacting her brain chemical, balance and all of that and her cycle regularity. And so we worked together over, a few months, and she like finally like her menstrual cycle stabilized. They were regular. Her mood was stable. And then I like still remember the session where like I met her baby. Like I'm gonna cry. She had her baby that she adopted on camera.
Oh,
And like I will never forget that like that Zoom meeting of just like she was just like so proud and like so grounded and so much trust in herself. And um yeah, it was just like those are the moments. Like those are the moments that make us do this work.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I would think stopping to sort of acknowledge the successes along the way is so important, especially with I would think when people come to you, they probably feel so broken in so many ways. Like they've tried it all, none of it has
Mhm.
worked, and there's that sort of hopelessness that can creep in.
Mhm.
Um, and that you'd brought up that this particular client had seen like a personal trainer and felt like she
Mhm.
was doing all the right things. And it seems lately, especially on social media, there's all of these influencers. And,
Mhm.
anybody who goes on who, has a certain physique are
Mhm.
really happy to share their diet and all this stuff. And it starts to kind of create this thing of like there's so much conflicting messages.
Mhm.
So, from I know you sort of do this like symptom-based approach, or that there's a symptom-based approach that's taken. What are your thoughts on, somebody who seems to try different diets, things going on? Um, like what if someone comes to you and they're like, "Oh, but I saw something online." Um, like what are the thoughts that you share with them? How do you try to
Mhm.
guide people towards something that's sustainable
Yeah.
versus a quick fix thing that, like you said, I think a lot of us are stuck with that quick reward mentality.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts on this. And I always think about where is that person coming to me from? They're coming exhausted from trying so many things, especially if it's a newer client and they're like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of seeing the conflicting messages and they're finally ready for help. Oftentimes they're still sorting through, well, I saw this on TikTok and I saw this from this influencer and they have a lot of questions. And so when I think about where they're coming from, it's like they are exhausted from the noise. They want to escape it, but they're not like ready to detach from it because of how and it's understandable, like how ingrained these messages become. And so really what I do with them is, they're asking this question, we start to connect it to what they've already learned about their body. And I might educate a little bit about the trend. Okay, based on what you learned about your body, do you think this makes sense for you? And so they start to understand and really build the belief of it's not just what everyone else is doing. It's they start to ask the question is this right for me? I had a client who she really struggled with body image issues, and in our process, her mood was shifting by leaps and bounds. And she was like noticing how much more stable she felt. We were working on her digestion as well, her digestion. I remember she like sent me a selfie from like New York City where she was traveling, and she's like, "I can't believe I can eat and tolerate these foods," and celebrating all these things, but getting stuck in the weight piece. And so every so often she said me, what do you think about this weight loss support? And so when it comes to that, and I work with people on weight too, in a a supportive way that works with their body. But I with situations like that, I would ask, where is this question coming from? Is it coming from like true curiosity that this fits what your body needs, or is it coming from urgency or fear that you're not going to get the result or some other thing that's driving you? Because that's where we start grasping at straws and taking things that don't help us, wasting money. And so I help them kind of get grounded in the purpose behind the question. And then we can educate and decide together from there. Versus like, don't do that thing or get off social media. It's really just understanding where they're coming to me from. Yeah.
I love that. Where what health practices, like what are two or three health practices that you think are pretty common but can cause a lot of harm? Like what should people kind of be on the
Mm.
lookout for and have the little like, Mandy in their shoulder kind of saying, "Hey, you may not want to do this." Like, you
Hmm.
know, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, there's so many. Let's go through a few that I've been just seeing. Some of it I've just been seeing always, and there's some that I've been seeing more often recently because of
Okay.
what's out there. One I would say is over supplementation without strategy. We were just talking about that, where people are, they'll come to me on so many supplements, and it's either from things they've collected on their own, from researching random stuff, or from ChatGPT, or from influencers, or from the like seven naturopaths they've seen, and it's like they just keep adding and adding and adding, and they don't know what's helping. They don't know why they're taking things. They don't know what to stop taking, and there's some things I can see in their plan often where I'm like, oh, I can see why that was helpful at that time. Let's evaluate if you still need it. And so it just becomes this like mixed bag of all these different, because supplements are powerful. Like they have an impact. It's not just, we don't want to be taking things kind of willy nilly. We need to really be sure that that's right for that person. And so one of my favorite pastimes is taking clients off supplements when they start with me. And we do things with supplements. We're just very strategic about it and careful about how we bring them in. And what is interesting is sometimes I'm able to identify in their list of supplements things that are actually increasing their symptoms. I see this all the time where let's say if we've identified they have histamine intolerance, which I work with a lot, I can see, wow, I think this one is actually increasing your histamine related symptoms. Or this one is actually exacerbating your anxiety because it's pushing catecholamines and dopamine too much, et cetera, et cetera. And so um, if someone gets to the point of like they don't know what's helping, what's working, sometimes we have to pare it back down before we can rebuild it up. So that's number one, I would say, that I see super often, almost every client.
Okay. Um, let's do the reverse of that. I would think there would be some universal truths that for almost anybody is really important to start with.
Hmm.
Um, one that came up in a past conversation, actually, it seemed like a common thread was around the state of like our food and
Hmm.
things that are done in the processing. Not trying to limit you to that, just trying to give you sort of a baseline. Like, what are a couple of universal truths that you feel like people should be really mindful of that would help keep them away from some of the issues that they're coming into?
Yeah. So in the supplement realm, you mean?
And you could do anything, supplement, lifestyle, diet, anything that if you could shout from a mountaintop and just have people kind of do a couple things you think would at least start to
Hmm.
move people away from danger.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it is like when we look at like diet at the foundation, when I look at people's diets, I find a lot of the people that reach me, it's not that they're eating a ton of like highly processed foods, just by the nature that the people I work with. Sometimes they have a mix of like sometimes they're eating healthy, sometimes they're not. But I do see, especially in women, if I look for nutrition foundations, I'm always assessing for under eating in general and under eating protein. A lot of people are in my space are eating a lot less than they think they are. Um, and so that's number one. And then from there, I do feel like a lot of people benefit from supporting at the foundation nutrients like vitamins, minerals, and sometimes like fatty acids. So a lot of people, it could be safe if they find a high quality source of like high quality multivitamin, magnesium supplement, a high quality, fatty acid, unless they're eating a lot of omega-3 rich fish. Those
Right.
basic things for the average person can really go a long way as long as you're sourcing from quality places. So those are good places to start.
Okay. Okay. And definitely not saying that that's all they need to do and they're set,
Yep.
but yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, well, okay. So this has been a journey that you have had to go through yourself and that
Mhm.
you come out the other side. You've helped so many other people do the same. Um, I'm curious. I I've heard a lot about things like coffee being really bad first thing in the morning, coffee
Mm.
good. Um, people should be doing time restricted eating. You
Mhm.
should eat, multiple times a day and focus on protein. What does your like morning routine look like from
Yeah.
the time you wake up until maybe like an hour, hour and a half into your day? What works for you?
Yeah.
What works for everybody, but what works for you? What does your morning look like?
Yeah. Let's talk about both of those things because you had asked before of what things might inadvertently cause harm and or really help. Fasting is on that list. And I think it is really, really important. And though there's been, really popular forums and books coming out about fasting from women. There's people like Dr. Mindy talking about it. And finally, I'm like, yes, I didn't write the book on it, but I have been doing that for years, like thinking about when people with a menstrual cycle should and should not fast. And I actually, in my journey, and we'll come back to the morning routine, but I've done times where I was unintentionally fasting before it was a thing just because I was working too much, working too many hours, and that actually made my PCOS worse, way worse, because I was under eating. And now, this is a decade and a half later that I've learned more about fasting. I think it can be a very, very powerful tool. And what it looks like for me is I always think about I need to earn the right to fast. Um, and so I have to make sure my body is like safe enough, nourished enough to actually have the benefits of the fasting and only do it during certain times of my menstrual cycle. Because for me, time restricted eating all cycle long, it worsens my mood. Um, because for one, it's like undernourishment, but also just with what is needed for hormone production and everything. So I don't fast in the week or so before my period bleed, like during that luteal phase. I do not fast around ovulation. And then I actually, and right now, because of like some extra stress in my life, I don't fast on a daily level, but I might a daily basis. But I might bring in short-term fasting, like a fasting mimicking diet once a month or every other month for longevity benefits. I have the genes for, I have kind of the moderate to high risk genes for cognitive decline. And so that's part of what motivates me. And then sometimes I'll do like a 24 or 36-hour fast because I've taught my body to be able to do that. And I'll do that for the mood and anti-inflammatory benefits. I have genetics that really cause me to hold a lot of inflammation in my body. But I have to make sure I don't overdo it because then I'll see my mood symptoms worse, my cycle gets irregular, all these things. So that's a little side note on the fasting that I think it can cause harm, but it can also have immense benefits when done correctly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, okay, so your morning routine then, when let's
Mhm.
assume you're not fasting, what
Mhm.
does a typical morning look like for you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of young kids. And so my morning routine will not be an example of like the perfect, the perfect cadence of things to bio optimize my health. Like I had to really release my expectations around that. And so in any given morning, I can wake up with like 1 to 3 children in my bed. Like I draw the line at the dogs. The dogs don't get to come in my bed. But I know for me, like my first priority in the morning is like regulating my nervous system and really feeling like grounded to start my day. My mornings are chaotic, they're stressful. I have 4-year-old twins, I have a 9-year-old. I'm like trying to get everyone out the door. Like sometimes I like want to pull my hair out. And so I have to like bookend that with like this morning, for example, I woke up and I did like a 20-minute kind of visualization meditation in my bed because one of the kids had already woken up. I avoid my phone. I'm just like a sensitive person. I try to avoid those external inputs in the morning. So no social media, no news. I've gotten off track with that in the last few months, and I can't tell you the impact that it's had. And now I'm like today, I'm starting that discipline again to not do that in the morning. And then, as an example from this morning, I had done my meditation. Um, Feeling all cozy and snuggly in my bed with one of the 4-year-olds. And I thought to myself, if the others stay sleeping, I can get my like interval bike in. That didn't happen. They all woke up. But in an ideal morning, I might either go out to the garage and do my strength training or I do only pretty short intervals so to not overstress my body. And then if I were to do that before that, I would get some protein and carbs in, or I might do like amino acids and a little creatine and then have my breakfast after, but get something in my body. So and then sunlight when possible. Typically for me, that happens of like after all the kids are dropped off, I get my breakfast in, try to get a pretty big portion of protein. And then if I can just like take my coffee outside, even if it's just like 1 or 2 minutes to like really settle myself before I like start my day with my clients. So there's so much more I would love to do in the mornings, but it's just I have to be hyper realistic at this stage in life.
Well, I would think, and I appreciate that. I would think a lot of people listening to this, there's that, I think pressure, especially if you're an overachiever, but this pressure that you should be doing more and doing all
Hmm.
the things and doing all the things perfectly. And I don't know that life is always that perfect and
Hmm.
easy. So doing what you can is better than saying forget it and just doing none of it.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot people will take from that,
Yeah.
um, and it's super relatable. I'm out of town right now and I'm way out of my routine and I just have to accept it. It is what it is.
Hmm.
So yeah, life will always throw you curveballs.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds like well, two things that have come up as you were talking. One is it sounds like you do a pretty good focus on getting enough protein in. And I feel like a couple of times it's been mentioned that like maybe women don't always get enough protein and maybe
Hmm.
even too little calories.
Hmm.
What's the problem with that? Like for somebody who really doesn't know other than they hear protein is good or
Hmm.
whatever, or they think carbs are bad, like why is protein important, like in your mind?
Yeah, and I will say I was just talking to my team about this morning of sometimes it's on the flip side of like because a lot of people are talking about protein and then all of a sudden they're eating like protein chips and protein cookies and these highly processed foods where, that's a whole other story. But I find with the people that I work with because like mood is such a focus, for one, they're getting those amino acids and the building blocks that actually are needed to make their brain chemicals along with like the nutrient cofactors. So getting the essentials too, it's really the blood sugar impact that it's stabilizing to blood sugar, and then even protecting our muscle mass because women start to lose muscle mass unless they're intentionally protecting it with eating enough protein and
Oh.
strength training as we age. And the more muscle you have, the easier it is to balance your blood sugar, the easier long-term weight management is. And so I think it's a shift that helps people feel better very, very quickly for all of those reasons. So yeah, that's why the focus is. And there's so much more. Like I get into like I'm not a foodie. I like to keep food very, very simple, but like food is medicine of like from there, it's like how do we bring in foods that really are anti-inflammatory? They help tame that inflammatory flame. They have really an impact in the body. So yeah, there's so much more beyond protein, but that's a good place for a lot of people to start.
Um, Another question, and I love that, by the way. Thank you. Um,
I see your wheels turning. I'm like, what is he
well,
going to
no,
ask?
because earlier I was trying to remember because earlier we were talking about how fasting can be good and bad,
Hmm.
and one thing that I had never really thought about um, was sort of the influence of whether or not you're bringing in calories and the stress that can put on your hormonal system, especially if maybe you're undernourished and your body is already feeling kind of this low key threat, or you're chronically stressed or chronically
Hmm.
inflamed. And then you mentioned being having a predisposition for I don't want to label it, but the sense I got was maybe like a dementia or some kind of like
Hmm.
something cognitive decline.
Hmm.
So and I would think for people that are listening to this, that would actually make their ears perk up
Hmm.
because I think that my understanding is that we're right kind of at that sweet spot where you can actually test and start to really get a sense on a genetic level what's going on with people.
Hmm.
So, can you just maybe shed a little bit more light on sort of individual genetic testing and how that influences what's going on with somebody on a hormonal level or how you
Hmm.
approach them in rebalancing themselves?
Yeah. So genetic testing is fascinating. It's an area where I'm always challenging myself to learn more and understand more. There's almost like too much that you could possibly learn at once. But I use a particular test that has more of a nutrigenomic focus of how can we that like epigenetic influence. How can we influence our genes with nutrition and lifestyle and work with those genes as well in those areas of hormones and inflammation and like cognition, nutrients. Like the test has so many different areas. So what I find is number one, when people get that information, um, sometimes like someone might feel like, oh my gosh, this I feel like a hot mess until they really understand it because like the test will show you there's a lot of genes that are neutral with no impact, but then you see all the ones that potentially have an impact. And I always remind clients, like, you're not a hot mess. It's like everyone has their unique genetic blueprint, and we don't know if genes are turned on or turned off. Like, think of them as light switches. Like, they can be turned on or turned off based on epigenetics. And so we have to look at, like, what is important to you right now? What is impacting you right now? And how do we use this data to help guide your choices more specifically? And so for me, for example, I have genetics that make me more prone to histamine intolerance, and like the enzymes that like break down histamine. And the interesting thing is, I never had histamine issues until after I had my twins, probably 4 years ago, or I never had them to a severe
Wow.
degree. So it wasn't just about my genetics. It's like, where did that predisposition come out? Well, after that pregnancy, long story short, I had sepsis. I was on antibiotics for 3 days. And then, like, I don't even remember. It's all a blur, probably 4 or 5 courses of 10-day antibiotics. My gut health totally shifted. I ended up with what's called post infectious POTS combined with the histamine symptoms. And now I had to really, then the histamine issues came out of the woodwork. And so it's like that, the shifts in my microbiome, along with the inflammation from the infection, along with my genetics, then it was like, bam, you got histamine
Wow.
issues now. And so it's just an example of, now that I know that, I can look at, okay, those enzymes that break down histamine, how do I bring in the nutrients that those enzymes need to function? How do I keep my inflammation under control, support the recovery of my gut health, so then I'm not on this like histamine battle, having to follow a histamine diet for forever. So it's just one example of how genetics can be powerful. And I get really into the genetics that impact mood as well. There's certain genes that impact how we like not just make the brain chemicals, but how fast we like clear them out. And some people they clear them out slowly, and they actually have a backlog of brain chemicals, which can lead them to feeling, agitated and overstimulated and irritable. And then other people they deplete them too quickly, or they don't make them well, and they feel like depressed and low. And then that all interacts with the menstrual cycle and hormonal shifts too. So that is where I nerd out on a daily basis when I get those reports back from a client. And honestly, I have so much fun doing it. Like I have to set a timer, a time limit on myself when I'm researching a client's tests of like, okay, it's been 2 hours, Mandy, you got to take a break, eat something, and then I keep going because it's so cool. And the person feels empowered, like they feel validated of like, oh wow, this always makes sense. And that's really that like light bulb moment, and then they actually feel more motivated to take action from that.
That's amazing. Um,
I
I'm
don't know if I
curious.
answered all of your questions in there.
No, no, you have. You have. It's you're bringing up a lot of cool stuff, and I'm thinking about different people in my lives, and sometimes I'll share with people, hey, I'm having so and so on, and we're gonna be talking about this, and try to
Mhm,
bring up questions. Um, and so I'm just trying to think, how do I distill this down? And I guess what what's like one fundamental truth about women's health that you wish more of your clients knew coming in to connect with you?
mhm. Yeah. I think, today we've talked a lot about like the importance of data, of having a personalized plan. And on top of that, I want to bring in kind of a softer truth to all of this. Because sometimes what happens is as we're collecting information, um, it it can increase this feeling of I have to control my health. Or people are coming in because they want to feel better so desperately that it leads to I have to control every input coming into my body. They over biohack themselves, which increases stress. They have too much on their wellness to do list, and there's so much urgency in feeling better, and that is very, very stressful. I don't believe that like health and wellness and eating well should be so stressful, that it should be so arduous and so many things you have to think about and do. And so I think if I could like have one fundamental truth that every woman would understand, it would be that you don't have to try so hard. Like you don't have to earn your wellness, you don't have to earn your health, and you don't have to have like a perfectly consistent, perfect plan to like fix your health issues. Because when we um, bring in the right information and we take action that's aligned with that, it actually gets to be easier. And it's like rather than a checklist, it is really like trusting the brilliance of the body to heal, the wisdom of the body to heal, really listening to what it needs. And then our daily supports and everything become simpler and easier. So then they can go and live their lives and influence their families and their workplaces and their community. So less control, and not trying so hard is like I always want to get clients to that place where we're like, oh wow, this is easier than I thought it would be. And then I'm like, yes, we did it.
I love it. It's interesting because I love that you get strategic and you try not to overwhelm people. There was a book I read recently by someone I like, Dr. Mark Hyman, but he had this point where you would take these quizzes and then he would talk about different tests you should take, and it
Mhm.
seemed like it would be very overwhelming and very expensive. And
Mm,
I thought, wow, that probably intimidates people. I know it did for me. It was like, okay, maybe I'll put that off till later type of thing.
yeah.
So the way that you're approaching this, I think just on an intrinsic level seems to make a lot of sense. Um, PCOS is something that has reared its head on women in my life. Um, in my sort of simple research of it and not being as trained as you, and definitely not being as much into the data of what's working. The one thing that seemed to come up a lot was sugar imbalances.
Hmm.
Is that something that you worry about, or that you see in your practice that you try to help people with? Is it kind of an overblown simplification of a topic?
Hmm.
Uh, what's your take on that?
Yeah, all of the above. So
Okay.
I what I see happen is someone will have either they're told they have PCOS because of their irregular cycles or an ultrasound. There's all these kind of debates on like how that diagnosis can happen. But then um typically what I see in this is going to sound pretty black and white, but I feel like they're told in a black and white way, like, oh yeah, this makes sense if they happen to be also overweight. And then the doctor is talking about insulin resistance. And then if they're not overweight, it's almost like there's like confusion in the doctor of like in their mind, what I see is that it's like connected to weight, which I don't think is the case. I see very, very lean people with PCOS. I see people who are not lean who have PCOS. And so like the newer information and what I see in the functional space, which I agree with, is there's different subtypes of PCOS. Some are very driven by blood sugar issues and insulin resistance. And the important thing here is it's not always insulin resistance and high blood sugar. The glycemic It's called glycemic variability, essentially how much blood sugar spikes and crashes. And like that variation is just as triggering to PCOS patterns as high blood sugar. And I think that was the case for me. The example I was giving earlier, where I was working a lot. I had started doing like Olympic style like weightlifting along with under eating and probably hypoglycemic episodes. I have a tendency towards B6 deficiency, which impacts the like blood sugar process and like can dip. And then if you have adrenal issues, you can't recover your blood sugar. Like there's so much to it,
Yeah.
where I think the assumption is often that it's insulin resistance when it can be either pattern and it can be not related to blood sugar at all. It can be adrenal related, it can be inflammatory related. Sometimes it's related to coming off certain types of the pill, or being caused by the pill itself. So that was the case for me, where I was on a birth control that increased my testosterone, and when I went off, my testosterone came down, but I still had high DHEA, which is like a different PCOS. So all of that, if that's making someone's head spin as they're listening, the point is that it's not, even with a single diagnosis that many, many people may share, is that there's not any one path that causes it. We have to look at that individual. So that's like the core message is people are going to have different driving factors. And what I hate to see is people are barking up the wrong tree. So they will be told they have PCOS, and then all of a sudden they're on a low carb diet and they're like, oh my gosh, my cycles are even more irregular. I feel even worse. And that's not what they needed at all. It was connected to something else. And genetics playing as well. So yeah.
No, it's great. It's though, if there's one thing that's opening my eyes with this conversation, is just how individual we all are.
Hmm.
And you had mentioned this very early on, that trying to simple it down into, if you have this, take this and you'll be
Hmm.
fine, misses so much of the
Yeah.
total picture.
Yeah.
And that your approach just seems to be like, let's start to see the forest through the trees
Hmm.
and make it really simple and really approachable and non-judgmental, and just easy to implement and stick with, more importantly, so that
Hmm.
it's not a roller coaster. So um I'm sitting here, I'm asking questions. You're probably, I would imagine, sitting here thinking about all the stuff that you offer. What's one area of your practice that we haven't touched on yet, that as we've been chatting, you're like, I wish that I wish that more people would understand this component of what we offer.
Hmm.
Just something I haven't asked you that might be coming up as we're sitting here randomly talking like this.
Yeah. Such a good question. And I think at the beginning I had kind of joked that I sometimes want to take my dietitian name tag off. Because for some people, depending on who they've seen in the past or what they see online, they associate that with like restriction, or even if not that, like that it's only about nutrition. Nutrition is powerful. That's why I've studied it for so many years. But what I'm finding in our work, and I'm still figuring out how to explain it in a way that makes sense to people, is in this process, we go beyond just like making changes to your nutrition and your supplements. It's a different way of relating to the body. It's a different way of relating to our menstrual cycle. And what I find is as we're doing that, people feel they go from feeling like their body is the enemy to feeling like they understand their body, they know how to support it. And that is just, we can't get that from just doling out protocols. And so we will kind of navigate these themes with clients, and even in the way that we help people track symptoms. One thing that I see sometimes that causes the challenge is people are super hyper vigilant in tracking all of their symptoms. They're wearing like, the tech that tracks everything about their health, and those things can be helpful, and it's interesting and fascinating, but then they're missing some of the deeper messages from their body. And this may sound a little woo to some people, but it's really backed in science and how our hormones shift. But there's, especially for people with a menstrual cycle, we're not the same every day of the month. And sometimes there's these needs that surface. We have different strengths and superpowers at different parts in the cycle. We have different challenges, and that tells us a lot about what is happening in the cycle, how to support and make that cycle more easeful. And it also sometimes tells us about our deeper needs. And so we're not therapists, we don't get into therapy territory, but we are helping people weave this. It's as cheesy as it sounds, like the science with the soul level. Because my ultimate goal with someone is not only that they're like, oh, my PMDD symptoms reduced by 80%, or my digestive symptoms reduced by 80%, or now my cycles are, regular again. Like that's important. And that's what they come for support on. But what I really care about is, can they sustain that progress? Is it improving not just their quality of life, but their impact on the world? And that comes from um, this relationship that they build with themselves in the process and rebuilding that trust. So these are things we weave in and sneak into the work as we're doing all the sciencey stuff. And I think that's honestly, it's what makes me glad that I started my own practice, so I could do things with my special sauce. Like I said earlier, we do things in kind of a unique way.
You do, and it's been really eye-opening, and, I can't wait to share this. I'm sure there's a lot of people who will watch this, where a lot of what you talked about is something where they have an aha moment and say, "I've struggled with
Mhm,
that. That's going on
mhm,
with me." So, for anybody that wants to get in touch with you or has heard this and said, "You know what? I've been going through similar things, and I feel like I'm grasping at straws. I'm not getting down to
mhm,
the bottom of this. And it's silly of me to keep doing this, jumping from supplement
mhm.
to supplement,
Yeah.
hoping that something works." How do people get in touch with you? Like, how does someone work with you?
Yeah, and I always tell people to like check in with as they're listening to an episode like this, like check in with what is resonating with you, like what kind of got stirred as they were listening to this message. And that way when they do reach out, they can share that with me, because that tells me a little bit about like how where they're at and how they think and how I can meet them there. So if you contact me after this, just give me a little note on that. But the best place to reach out is through my website, revealfunctionalnutrition.com, or Google my name, Mandy Rother, or I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes somewhere. And this work, and I will say it's powerful, but it's not for everyone. Like we go, if a client comes to me and they're like, just fix me, and I can tell that they're wanting a very passive role, I might not be the practitioner for them. We want people who are willing to come in and partner with us, collaborate with us, that they want to have choice in their care, because we really see this as teamwork, not like band-aids and prescriptions and all of that. And so that type of person, if you're curious, you're feeling that nudge, that's how you find us.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for what you do, and congrats
Yeah,
on 5 years, and
thanks.
cheers to five more and many, many, many more.
Yes.
But thank you so much for your time, Andy. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again at some point.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks. Bye.